Vanik to take over and please get started, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your kind introduction. And again, I'm extremely sorry for the delay. Exactly for 15 minutes I'm late. Okay, so
So hopefully, sir,
so
this session will give you a 15 minutes time up to 3 p.m. Sir.
okay, so thank you. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
So let's start. So this is the brief outline of my talk. So first of all, I'll give brief introduction of cryptography, then so two major classes of cryptographic schemes, symmetric key cryptography and asymmetric key cryptography. Then another important technique, which is message authentication. And
Sir, sorry to interrupt. Can you speak a little bit louder? Your voice is coming too low.
Okay.
Now it's okay, sir.
Yeah, please, sir, carry on.
So public key certificates then which are very essential, and I'll be explaining why at all they are required. Then secure socket layer and secure shell, two of the applications which uses all these techniques that we'll be learning through this lecture. Okay, so is my voice audible right now? Is it proper?
Okay, sir. It is audible, sir.
Okay. So cryptography is the science of keeping secrets secret. Okay, so in computer network, we are using different services over the network remotely. So in that case, our data, they are in transit from while going from the source to the destination. And what we would like, depending on our say application requirement, either would be like in say confidentiality of our data, integrity of our data, and also authentication. So confidentiality is whether while in transit, others are able to view what the data is being transmitted. Then this integrity while in transit, whether the data has been tampered with or not. And then authentication when we receive something. So if it claims to be coming from say party X, how can we prove that it is actually coming from party X? So cryptographic techniques, so cryptography is the science which actually provides us techniques so which we can use for providing these sort of services. So any cryptographic scheme, we have these ingredients. So 6 ingredients we have. So the plain text message that we want to send, that is AIM. Then the encryption algorithm. So we have also some function FE, which actually encrypts, which transforms the plain text message into something gibberish, which the other parties, if they observe that thing, they cannot make out what the original text was. So that is called the ciphertext. So we have plain text, then the encryption function FE, which takes as input the plain text message, and another input is the encryption key itself. So keys are nothing but bit streams. So these are strings of bits which are used as input to this encryption function FE. So message, with the help of this key, the encryption algorithm transforms the message to ciphertext, and that ciphertext is transmitted over the network and it is sent to the destination. Then we have this decryption algorithm at the receiving end. The receiver uses this decryption algorithm box or say decryption algorithm function, say FD, and in order to decrypt it, it requires the ciphertext. So the ciphertext will be transformed to the plain text. So the plain text will be recovered from the ciphertext, and in order to do that, the receiver needs to have some sort of decryption key. The keys are nothing but strings of bits, so bit strings. And this decryption key is called the KD. So these are the 6 different ingredients we have in any cryptographic scheme. So we have message, the encryption algorithm, the encryption key, the ciphertext, the decryption algorithm, a decryption key. So, and in any case, the security of any cryptographic scheme actually depends on the secrecy of the key itself, not the secrecy of the algorithm. So in most cases, these algorithms are all public. So algorithms, they say how this given input, given the plain text message and given a key stream, how the algorithm works. So this, how part of this algorithm, they are all public. So everybody knows how one algorithm, standard algorithm operates. But what is not public, so what is to be kept secret for keeping this security mechanism intact is this secrecy of the, we need to keep these keys secret. So management of these keys are very important, right? Okay, so these cryptographic techniques, they can be classified in 3 broad categories depending on certain criteria. Like say, the first classification is based on the types of operations that are used to transform plain text to ciphertext. Okay, so based on this, the cryptographic techniques, we can have either substitution cipher. Also, these substitution cipher with these techniques, we call them a cipher, as because from plain text they are generating cipher, and cipher text they are generating the getting back the plain text. So we can have substitution cipher or the transposition cipher. In case of substitution, this assume that our text is ABCD, plain text is ABCD. So in case of substitution, these individual characters of the plain text will be substituted by other characters. So if I say, so simply take one example, say each character will be replaced or substituted by the third character to the right. Say A would be substituted by D, B would be substituted by E, and so on. Okay, so A, B, C, D will be substituted by D, E, F, G. So this is simple substitution cipher. Then transposition, in this case, characters, they are not substituted, or the text, the individual characters making up the text, they are not substituted, rather they are transposed, their positions are changed. Okay, so if a given text, say A, B, C, D, if I arrange them in 2 by 2 matrix form, say first row A, B, then second row C, D, then if I take column wise, it would be, the ciphertext would be A, C, B, D. Okay, again, I'm sorry, I'm not able to. So typically, the way it is, say these online classes, I use my pen to write on my presentation screen as well. So I'm unable to do that right now. And also the second class is the number of keys that are used. So we can have either symmetric key cryptographic system or asymmetric key crypto system. So in symmetric key, between any two parties, we have a single key, and between any two parties, in case of asymmetric, we have two different keys. All right. So symmetric and asymmetric, these classes will be going, these classes of cryptographic techniques will be looking into data. And the third class of cryptographic techniques, they are based on the way that they are actually based on the way the plain text is processed. So you might be having, say, a long message, and in case of block cipher, this long message is divided into number of blocks, fixed size blocks. Okay, and each of these blocks, then they are taken one at a time and they are converted into ciphertext, corresponding ciphertext. But in case of stream cipher, so we have a block cipher, the way the plain text is processed, it is in terms of blocks in case of block cipher, but in case of stream cipher, the plain text is considered as a stream of bytes. The plain text is considered as a stream of bytes, and to the encryption algorithm, this plain text is fed as stream of bytes. The key, from the key itself, key stream is generated, that is also fed to the encryption box, and we have a stream of ciphertext. So there is no such notion of block boundary in case of stream cipher. Okay, so stream cipher, they processes input elements continuously. So we have a stream of, at the input we have stream of input text, and we at the output we have stream of ciphertext. Okay, so these are the three major classifications. Now we'll look into these two categories, symmetric and asymmetric. Mind that they differ in the way we have. So between any two pairs of any pair of, say, sender and receiver, whether we have a single key or the we have two keys. So in case of symmetric key, so if you recollect that in the 6 ingredients of any cryptographic scheme, so in case of symmetric key cryptography, two keys were there. One was encryption key, another was decryption key. So in case of symmetric key cryptography, we have this KE is equal to KD. So encryption key is equal to decryption key. So the common key has to be agreed upon by the sender and the receiver before the actual communication can take place. So now here exactly we have another problem. So we are talking about say providing say confidentiality, integrity, authentication to our communications, and it says that you can do it using symmetric cryptography, where both the sender and the receiver they will be sharing the same key. So this key K would be shared by both the sender and the receiver. Okay, so we have KE equal to KD. But the question is, how does these two say parties, say party X and party Y, they actually share this secret key? So assume that they are so in two say different cities separated by so they are at two different geographic locations. Okay, it's not possible to say physically exchange the keys by hand. So the question is, how does these two parties actually agree upon the fact that they will be using, say, some secret key, the symmetric key K between themselves? So that itself is another problem. We call it as the key management, key establishment. So how do two parties securely establish a key K over some insecure medium? So we actually, I have not kept that part in this presentation. So we assume that somehow they have exchanged and established a secret key K between themselves. So mind that this symmetric key cryptography is also known as the secret key cryptography, because we have a single key K which has to be kept secret between the sender and the receiver. Nobody else should be knowing that. So in case of this symmetric key cryptography, each pair of communicating parties, they need to have a secret key. So if we have A and B only, we need only one key. If we have A, B, C, three parties, we need to have three keys between A, B, B, C, and CA. So in any case, if you have n number of parties, we require n choose to nc2 that many number of keys. So if you n choose 2 is n into n minus 1 divided by 2. So if I have say 100 parties, so 100 participants in a communication, and they would be using symmetric cryptography, we require 100 multiplied by 100 minus 1, 99 divided by 2, that many number of keys, right? So we'll see. So in case of symmetric cryptography, that is one of the overheads in terms of number of unique keys required. Okay. So some of the algorithms that fall into this category of symmetric cryptography, this data encryption standard DES, the oldest one, it was introduced during 1970s, and US FIPS, that Federal Information Processing Standards Organization, something. So that actually adopted these as a standard, and DES uses 64-bit block. So input is divided into 64-bit blocks, and it uses 56-bit key. And DES, as the key length is that not much high, DES is no longer considered as a secure cryptographic symmetric key cryptographic algorithm. So another one is triple DEA, which uses 3 execution of the DES algorithm. Here we have the key length is 56 multiplied by 3, that 168 bits. So it uses 3 stages of DES. And more recently, it was standardized in 2001. AES, Advanced Encryption Standard. It is still used in many of the tools. In SSH also AES used. So it has got 128-bit blocks. So it processes 120 bit of the input text at a time, and it may use either 128 or 192 or 256-bit key. So key lengths may be different. So 3 possibilities are there. So that doesn't mean we have only these three type of symmetric cryptographic algorithms. So we have many other cryptographic algorithms. It also actually depends on the target platform where these cryptographic algorithms would be implemented and would be operating on. Okay. So the next is asymmetric key cryptography. So in case of symmetric key cryptography, both the sender and the receiver, they'll be having the same key. The encryption key and the decryption key are the same. Okay. This is the symmetric key cryptography. So in case of symmetric key cryptography, we have key K here. When this party X needs to send something, so it encrypts that data using key K. So this Y is the ciphertext, and this E is the encryption function. It takes the key K and encrypts the plain text message X, and it gets the ciphertext Y. When it is received by the receiver, it applies the decryption algorithm over the ciphertext and the same secret key K, and it gets back, so it retrieves the original plain text message X. Okay, so now we're talking about, so while in transit, only the ciphertext is transmitted. So from the ciphertext, anybody can look into the get hold of the ciphertext, but that person will not be able to get, if at all that person doesn't have this key K. So the assumption is that nobody else has got this key K, okay, except the sender and the receiver. So the other parties, even though they get hold of this ciphertext Y, they will not be able to get back the original message X because they don't have this secret key K. So if this key K is compromised, then entire cryptographic scheme is compromised. Okay, so in case of asymmetric key cryptography, we have two keys. So this encryption key and decryption key, they are no longer the same one. So we have two keys. So we have encryption key and decryption key. One of them is called public key, another is called the private key. Okay. And the beauty of this scheme is that we can use any one of these key pairs. So we have public key and private key. We can use any one of these key belonging to this pair to encrypt our message. If we use the public key to encrypt the message, then we should use the private key to decrypt the message. Otherwise, if we use the private key to encrypt the message, we should use the public key to decrypt the message. Okay, so in this case, this diagram actually shows how confidentiality can be achieved using public key cryptography. This is called asymmetric key due to the fact that these two keys are different. And from the name itself, you know, these two keys, among the two keys, public keys are made public. So everybody knows what is the public key of one party X, right? And private keys are private. They need to be kept private with the owner of that key. So if say X is one party, so X will have two keys, one public key, another private key. Okay, so in a group of n number of entities, so if we have n number of entities, in this case we require only 2n number of keys. So every party will have two number of keys. So if n is equal to 100, the same example, we have n participants, then we require only 200 keys. Whereas in case of say symmetric cryptography, we require say 4,000 something. So that many number of keys are required. Okay. So if we want to achieve confidentiality, then say assume that this party is Bob. Bob wants to send something to Alice in confidence. So that means while in transit, data should not be visible to others. So this is the plain text X, and this is Bob's public key. So in Bob's public key ring, Bob has got the public key of all other persons with whom Bob needs to communicate. So in Bob's public key ring, we have Alice's public key as well. So Bob wants to send something secretly to Alice. So it gets Alice's public key and uses the encryption algorithm to transform X using Alice's public key to something to some ciphertext Y. And this ciphertext Y is transmitted over the public network. And when this receiving end, at the receiving end, they say receiving end is Alice, and Alice has got its own private key. Alice has her own public key. Sorry, private key. So this one is Alice's private key. So when this ciphertext is received, this ciphertext can be decrypted using Alice's private key so that Alice gets back the original message X. Right. So in this case, when this is in transit, the ciphertext cannot be decrypted because it was encrypted with Alice's public key, and it was encrypted with Alice's public key. It can only be decrypted using Alice's private key. But Alice's private key is there with only Alice. So nobody has got Alice's private key. So nobody else would be able to decrypt this ciphertext. So in this case, confidentiality achieved, but authenticity is not achieved because anybody. So if after decrypting this message using Alice's private key, Alice no way can guarantee that the message was actually sent by Bob. So because any third party, because Alice's public key is public, it is available to all. So it's known to all. So any third party can get hold of Alice's public key, generate a message, encrypt it using Alice's public key, and send it to Alice, claiming that it is actually coming from Bob. And Alice has no way to verify that it is actually coming from Bob. In the next slide, we'll be going through this spec. So how we can use this public key cryptography for authentication alone. So in the previous slide, we have seen how we can use public key cryptography for confidentiality alone. Now for authentication alone. So in this case, we have Bob wants to send something, and it wants to achieve authentication. So it when the ciphertext is received by Alice, Alice should be able to say that it is actually coming from Bob. So the plaintext message is generated. It is X and encrypted using Bob's private key. Now it is encrypted with the sender's private key. In the previous case, it was encrypted with a receiver's public key if we want to achieve confidentiality. If we want to achieve authentication, then we should use sender's private key. So this message is encrypted with sender's private key, and that ciphertext is sent over the say public network. And when it is received by the receiver will decrypt it using Bob's public key, the sender's public key, and will get back the message. And it can verify. So if it can successfully get back X from the ciphertext, it can verify successfully that it is actually coming from Bob, because if something can be decrypted using Bob's public key, so that means that ciphertext was encrypted using Bob's private key, and Bob's private key is there with Bob only. Nobody has got Bob's public key, right? So we have seen how we can use asymmetric key cryptography or public key cryptography for achieving confidentiality and authentication. And we can combine these two scenarios to achieve both confidentiality and authentication. And later on, we'll see this is not exactly used, because if we want only authentication, this entire message has to be encrypted using private key. And the private key lengths are now typically, if we talk about this IRSA, says minimum it should be 2048 bits. Okay, and so encrypting the entire message using RSA 2048 bits, it's a computationally intensive, it will take some time, but we want authenticity only. So in this case, what we require, not the message, rather something, some summary of the message. We call it as the hash would be generated, and that hash would be encrypted with the sender's private key. So that scheme we'll look into later on. Okay, so in the asymmetric cryptography, we have this different algorithms, the most popular being this RSA. And in two subsequent slides, I'll give you brief idea on how RSA exactly works. So it was developed in 1970s. It's a block cipher and most widely implemented, and it is still most widely used. This generation algorithm based on this fact. So we have to generate two large prime numbers P and Q, calculate N is equal to P cross Q, P multiplied Q, and phi N is Euler quotient function P minus 1, Q minus 1, phi of N, and then select one integer E such that they are relatively prime. That means this phi N and E, they are relatively prime, so that their GCD would be 1. So we select E, and also we select D such that versus D, which is multiplicative inverse of E mod phi N. Right. So from P and Q, we have derived ED, and N is equal to P cross Q. So the public key, which would be published and would be known to all, is E comma N, this part. And the private key, which will be kept private, is this D comma N, this part. Okay, so this E comma N is made public, and the property is such that from the knowledge of E and N, it's computationally infeasible to get back what is D, or get an idea about what D is. So during RSA encryption, the message, if it is treated as a number, so message is raised to the power E. So message is encrypted using public key, so we assume. So M to the power E mod N. So we get the ciphertext, and during decryption, we do ciphertext is raised to the power D mod N. We are decrypting using private key, and we'll get back the original message. So this may be reversed. So we can use the private key to encrypt, and we can use a public key to decrypt. So here is one example. 7 and 11 are two prime numbers, and we calculate N equal to 77, and this phi N is 60, and we choose E13 and D37 such that E cross D mod 60 equal to 1. So this E comma 77, this is our public key, and D comma 77, this is our private key. So assume that we want to send some plain text message M, which is equal to 5, its value is 5. And so the ciphertext would be plain text to the power this E, which is 5 to the power 13 mod 77 26, and ciphertext. From the ciphertext, we can get back the plain text by raising the ciphertext to the power D. Here it is 37 mod 77, which is 5. So strength of this scheme lies on this fact that, so given the knowledge of E and N, so this is public, E and N is public. So from this, we cannot have, so when P and Q are very large, sufficiently large, it's very difficult to get, say, any idea about what D is, small d is, from this given two numbers E and N. Right? So far we have seen the cryptographic schemes. One is secret key cryptography or symmetric key cryptography. Another is called asymmetric key cryptography or public key cryptography. Okay. So in message authentication, requirements is this: we must be able to verify that the message came from apparent source. Okay, so when it is coming from another party, you are getting some message. The requirement is that should be able to prove that it is coming from the actual source. It protects against active attacks, like say falsification of data. So the attacks can be either active or passive. So if somebody passively listening to your conversation and looking into what exactly you are sending, so that is called say passive attack. But if somebody actually creates some data, some message and sends to the recipient claiming that it is actually coming from that person, so that is falsification of data. And in this case, the receiver must be able to verify that it is actually coming from the party that is that the message claims to be. Okay. So secure hash function is another component. In this case, a variable length message or data block is passed through a say mathematical transformation function, say capital H, and which actually generates a hash value small h, fixed length hash value small h from say message of arbitrary length. So it can be of any length. Capital M may be of any length. This capital H produces fixed length. So it may be 1 MB. It may produce a 256 bit hash. If it is 10 MB as well, it will generate 256 bit hash, for example. Okay, so it generates fixed length hash. So Hx is relatively easy to compute for a given x. Okay, given any message x, Hx as of that message should be relatively simple to compute, and it is one way. Given the hash, it's very difficult to find out what the original message was. So if you are given small h, it is computationally infeasible to find x, the original message, such that hash of capital H of that x is small h. Another two properties of these secure hash functions are, mind that as these hash functions are mapping from a say mapping a large domain to a smaller domain, so there has to be some collision. So that means for two messages there may be the same hash, but the property of this secure hash function is such that given x, so you know some message x, it is computationally impossible to find out another message y which is not equal to x, such that hash of both of these messages h and x are same. So we call it as weak collision resistance and strong collision resistance. It is computationally infeasible. So you are not given any message, but you are asked to come up with two messages x and y, such that hash of these two messages are same. So we have secure hash functions, which given a message of arbitrary length, it will generate a fixed length message, a fixed length hash of that message. And we have message authentication code. In this case, along with the message, some additional thing are added. Okay, so this is called a message authentication code, and some MAC algorithm is used to generate that message authentication code, which will be appended with the original message. So this is my original message, and this original message is appended with a MAC, message authentication code, which is computed from the message and one secret, which is shared between the sender and the receiver. So we'll see whether this K is some secret key, whether this can be some secret, say secret key or the private key of any public key cryptographic system. So this can be, so this MAC algorithm can be different. So this can be either a secret key or this can be a private key as well, and this is public key. So in case of digital signatures, this PK is the private key of the sender. So along with the message, some signature is appended. Okay, so this signature, how this is generated normally. So this message is hashed first, the hash is generated, then hash is encrypted with the private key of the sender, and that acts as a message authentication code, and that is appended with the message and it is transmitted. When the receiver receives the message along with the message authentication code, which is called the signature part, and that signature will be compared. So from the message itself, again the MAC will be generated. Okay. So in case of this digital signature scheme, this from the message, hash should be generated, and this is the encrypted hash that would be decrypted using sender's public key. And this decrypted hash and the generated hash, they would be compared. If they are same, then the message is considered to be authentic. So this is one way. So this anyway, the concept is in case of message authentication, we'd be generating some message authentication code, and that message authentication code would be transmitted along with the message itself. Like now, these public key certificates are very important. Uh, the need for a public key certificate, it arises from this fact. Say, I want to say transact with, say, State Bank of India. So I want to use its, say, internet banking facility, for example, or say Bank X. Bank X is net banking service. So in this case, first of all, in order to authenticate whether I'm talking to the exact banks, a bank access or a net banking service, we require public key information. So how do we know that? How do we know as a user bank access public key? Okay, so that public key has to be disseminated to all the users. So how this information can be disseminated? This public key information that can be disseminated to all the users. So one way is to have this public key certificate. So these public key certificates, they are used, they contain this information, this public key information of certain organization, and that public key information, that message will be signed by some trusted certification authority. So normally the certification authorities, they generate these certificates, and when you say open, say Bank X's online banking, say website, you can click on that lock sign and you can get information about the certificate, digital certificate of that bank. Okay, and you can also see the details of that digital certificate, who has issued that digital certificate, and so on, and other information. So digital certificate, it contains the public key information. Just assume this. So these are like say physical certificates. So when we graduated from universities, we got certificates from the university. That certificate is actually a statement that this person has say passed this course with these marks and so on. And that statement is validated by putting a signature at the end. So corresponding to that, so that physical world analogy of a certificate, so we have digital certificate. Digital certificate contain information regarding one person's or one organization's public key, and that information is certified by putting a signature, digital signature of the certification authority. Mind that digital signature is generated by getting the hash of the message, then it is encrypted using the private key of the certification authority, and that encrypted hash is appended with the original message, so original certificate content, and that thus we have the digital certificate. Okay, so these digital certificates are used to disseminate information about one's public key information to the other. Right. So these are used in other protocols. Like say now talk about these network protocols. I'm talking about these network protocols which actually uses digital certificates for say letting other party know about the public key of some entity. Okay. So we have security facilities in the TCP/IP protocol stack. IPsec is one security mechanism which is provided at the network layer. SSL TLS is some security mechanism which is provided at the transport layer. So on top of TCP, we have SSL or TLS, right? And if some applications are using UDP, then we have the datagram version of TLS, DTLS. So whether so we have some application which is using, so HTTP normally it uses TCP, but when you are using HTTPS, that means SSL or TLS in between TCP and HTTP, right? And security can be integrated into the application at the application level itself, like say PGP, SMIME, Kerberos. So PGP, SMIME are email security solutions. So they are part of this application itself. So this so application protocol itself, like this SMTP. So on top of SMTP, security is provided. Kerberos is authentication protocol in a distributed system. secure electronic transaction which uses HTTP. So this is security provided on top of the application protocol. So they are integrated with the application itself. But in this case, if we have TLS, these applications, they have the opportunity to use the security service as the transport layer. So we can have either simple HTTP or say secure HTTP via SSL or TLS. Right. So brief on the secure socket layer. This protocol was developed in 1994 by this Netscape, which had Netscape Navigator at that point of time, one of the browser, one of the few browsers at that point of time, web browsers. And then SSL came via different versions. Currently we have an SSL, later on it was standardized, it was taken by IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force, and we have the recent version, TLS version 1.3. And SSL, when it was taken by IETF, its name was given as Transport Layer Security, or TLS. And TLS is not a single protocol, rather it's a suite of protocol. We have TLS record protocol, TLS handshake, TLS change cypherspec, TLS alert, TLS heartbeat, and so on. Okay, so this TLS record protocol, actually it provides the basic security services like this confidentiality authentication to the other layers. And like this TLS handshake, this protocol is actually responsible for, before any sort of data can be communicated between two parties, it establishes a security secure connection between two parties. It establishes all those say which all those things like say which encryption algorithm, which secret key cryptographic algorithm would be used, then what would be the key length, what would be the keys themselves, and so on. So all those things are performed by this TLS handshake protocol, right? And this is some overview of this TLS handshake protocol. So it has got different phrases. In the first page, some handshaking, initial handshaking. Client says, I'm using this browser. My browser supports TLS version this. And server will also say that I'm using this browser. My browser supports TLS version this. The minimum of them, that version would be used. And then server will send its certificate to authenticate it to the client. So this client would be able to verify to whom it is talking to. The server authentication would be done here, and server will send its own key material. Then if client authentication is required, client will send its certificates, and client will send its key exchange material also. So after this, once these key exchange materials are exchanged between the client and server, these keys will be established. So after this phase 4 is over, both this client and server will have the secret keys established. Okay, and this SSL record protocol, this is used. So this is the base protocol, as you can see. This is the base protocol. This is used by all others. So once these security parameters are established, this given the application data, it would be first fragmented. SSL uses fragments of length, say, 1400 bytes maximum, and then it would be compressed. So SSL allows compression. Then message authentication code would be generated. This actually provides authentication. Then this compressed message plus the MAC will be encrypted, and some header will be prepended. So that is how this SSL segment is generated, and it would be given to next TCP. So TCP will forward it to the network layer, data link layer, physical. In bits it will be transmitted, it will travel to the destination, physical layer will receive it, construct the frames, data link layer will verify the frames, network layer will verify the network header, transport layer it will be received, it will check the transport header content, and after that it will be given to the SSL layer at the destination, which will do the reversing. So it will first of all check the header content whether this is perfect or not, then it will decrypt, then it will verify this authentication part, it will verify the MAC, then it will decompress and will get back the fragment. Until and unless all the fragments are received, it will wait, and when all the fragments are received, it will be reassembled again, and the application data will be given back to the target application. Sorry.
Sir, sorry to disturb you, sir. We have already
Yes.
ended our time, sir. Yeah, sir, please continue.
Okay, so can I have 1 minute more?
Sure, sure,
Thank you.
sure.
Okay, so now this secure shell is a method for remote login from one host to another. So this is a secure alternative to non-protected login protocols like say earlier we used to use Telnet, RLogin, or remote copy, RCP, and so on. So those kind of insecure protocols are made secure by SSH. And SSH also contains say 3 protocols. So it consists of 3 protocols. So this transport layer, SSH transport layer protocol on top of TCP we have, and it provides server authentication, confidentiality, and integrity. So, and user authentication protocol, SSH client authentication. It authenticates client to the server, and SSH connection protocol. Once a secure connection has been established, that can be multiplexed among different applications. Okay, right. Okay, so in brief, the next slides actually it talks about how authentication is done. Case of server authentication, so server has got public private key pair, then public key will be sent from once a connection is established, public key will be sent from host B to host A. Host B is the server, and host A will save it in its own public key repository for the different servers with whom it will be talking to. So this is the SSH server and this is the SSH client. And in terms of client authentication may be in terms of password. This may be password-based authentication or public key authentication. In case of public key authentication, this host, the user needs to have public key, private key pairs, and that public key will be installed at the server end as well. Right? So during the connection setup, both the client and the server, they agree on the symmetric encryption algorithm to be used, and they generate the encryption key as well. So this is part of that SSH transport layer protocol. And SSH uses strong encryption algorithms such as AES, and also has algorithms such as SHA-2. So SHA-2 is one hash algorithm, MD5 is another hash algorithm, and they vary in terms of number of bits they generate as the hash length, right? Okay, so that's it. Thank you. I'm finished. So if you have any question or if there is any time for taking questions, I'm already late.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your session. It was quite interesting, and we could have asked you to continue more, but due to this our limitation of time,
Yes,
so we have to stop you here. But similarly, for next sessions, we'll ask you to continue on with us.
okay, sure.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, sir.